Welcome to the Southern District of Texas. My name is Ryan Patrick. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas, 43 counties stretching from here to Laredo. And we're here today to talk about a very important case that was prosecuted here in the Southern District with the wonderful men and women standing behind me and some others in the back of the room. And that was a case of human labor trafficking that happened in Katy many years ago. And we're here today because a unique twist in this case that we believe is probably the first of its kind in the entire country. I want to give you a little bit of background about the case, and we have some others who also speak more specifically on how their agencies were involved. But to give you a little bit of background, this is a joint task force, the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance, and the agencies involved in this case, federal and state, local agencies, all involved to root out human trafficking that we have here in Houston. And as it was pointed out to me just a few moments ago, Houston isn't just a hub of human trafficking, we're the hub of human trafficking prosecution because of this model and because of the agencies involved. And this model was started in 2004 and has been taken across the country as a model. And so specifically in this case, just to give you a little bit of background if you're not aware of the case, what happened was there were neighbors in Cinco Ranch, in a cul-de-sac in Cinco Ranch, and there was a woman who was at home rehabbing a foot injury she had. And she saw a woman walking through the neighborhood with some young kids, kind of acting like a nanny, and over time befriended this woman and realized things just did not add up with her stories, and other neighbors started to put pieces together. And it was through this group of neighbors that they realized something was going on in this home, on their street, and they decided to do something about it. And what they did at the end of the day is they called a tip line that one of the neighbors saw in a poster hanging on the wall of a bathroom, if I'm correct, or wasn't it a bathroom wall poster?
Yes.
And it's one of those tip lines, if you see something, say something. And so this started with neighbors trying to help this woman. It took them many months to get that trust with her and to be able to speak with her openly. And ultimately, it was the neighbors who hatched the plan to get her out of the neighborhood, get her out of the house. This would be a great movie one day. I mean, it's all true. You couldn't make this stuff up. No one would believe it. But here's what's amazing about this is not only did this wonderful task force behind me get into action, prosecutors filed a complaint in this case. We're able to go and file federal charges, multiple counts for conspiracy to commit labor trafficking, visa fraud. There were 5 total charges. At the end, both defendants, the husband and wife in this case, they pled guilty to visa fraud and to unlawful withholding of documentation for the furtherance of forced labor. They held her passports back. This was a Nigerian woman who was brought over here under pretenses to be a nanny. She signed a ridiculous contract that would almost be laughable to anybody who would look at it. She had limited English skills. She probably did not know what she was signing. But they brought her here. And she worked in this home 24 hours a day, taking care of little children. She was forced to sleep on the floor between their beds. She was not given any provision of privacy, food, care. There really wasn't anything. This is modern-day slavery, and this is exactly what it looks like. And this was happening on a cul-de-sac in Cinco Ranch. And if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere, not only in Houston or Texas or anywhere else in the country. And that's why, in this case, we want to bring special significance to it for this reason. Once the defendants in this case pled guilty, our financial litigation group was able to jump in and find out that this family had significant assets, multiple homes, multiple cars, cash in bank accounts, fully funded retirement accounts. We were able to go in and seize that. And at the sentencing, the Department of Labor was incredibly helpful coming in with tables and worksheets on how they calculated her back pay. And the judge in this case ordered restitution of $121,046.91. Okay, so how is this different than any other criminal case where someone is ordered in restitution? Well, in most criminal cases, the judge will order restitution. It will be that usually doesn't even start to get paid till after a sentence, till they're on supervised release, until they're on probation. Well, instead of $500 a month for the next 20 years, our financial litigation attorneys were able to go in and seize assets, and a check has been cut for that $121,000 plus some interest to the victim in this case to make her whole. And we believe this is the first case of its kind in the country where with one check we were able to make this woman whole. Now, we can't fix the emotional and physical scars that she might have gotten through this ordeal, But we were able to make her as financially whole as possible, so that she has a chance to start a new life, whether it's here, wherever she chooses to go. So Julie Searle, she prosecuted this case. Ruben Perez, who's now with the district, representing the district attorney's office, he also prosecuted this case. Martha Menace and her wonderful staff in the financial litigation section, they jumped on the financial aspects of this. I want everybody to understand this was a woman brought here, more or less, she was brought here on a tourist visa. And it was after 6 months is when Department of Homeland Security, when the Department of State can step in, when their expertise, everybody up here has a specific expertise where they bring it to this type of program because this law is complicated. These are laws that are not frequently used because we just don't know about it. But we need people in the community to let us know when they see things like this that they know are not right. When they hear things in their neighborhood. And my guess is there's a lot of people out there who have this gut instinct, and that's what these neighbors did. They followed their gut in this case. And they broke open a case, like we said, we believe it's one of the first of its kind. So there's 21 law enforcement agencies involved in this. Also, we have the YMCA is incredibly important in this process. They handle our victim services, everything from support services to financial services to just being the liaison between law enforcement and the victim in this case. But this task force is not just about labor trafficking, it's about sex trafficking. It's about human smuggling. It's everything that you can imagine, from the cantinas and the sex trafficked girls we have in Houston to people who are smuggled into this country, whether they are domestic workers like this, where there's agricultural workers. I can't stress this enough. This is what modern day slavery looks like, and we want to lead the nation in prosecuting these crimes, bringing these people to justice, and the best that we can make these victims whole, at least what they should have been owed to begin with. So I'm going to turn this over to Michael Perkins with the Department of State. Michael?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Patrick, for the opportunity to speak here today and to explain Diplomatic Security Service's role in this investigation. My name is Michael Perkins. I'm the Special Agent in charge of Diplomatic Security Service's Houston Field Office. The Diplomatic Security Service, which is the law enforcement branch of the United States Department of State, has the largest overseas presence of any federal agency in the United States government. DSS has special agents working in almost every U.S. embassy and consulate around the world, including Abuja and Lagos in Nigeria. The DSS Houston Field Office, our agent assigned to Human Trafficking Task Force, Kate Langston, worked closely with our agents assigned to Nigeria, as well as with our local, state, and federal partners to bring this case to a successful conclusion. In Nigeria, our agents actually went out in some cases to villages that did not even have electric power and conducted field interviews with the victim's family using flashlights. So they were able to help us provide information that brought this case, or helped bring this case to a successful conclusion. Nonetheless, we understand that a case is never truly closed until the victim receives justice, which is what we're seeing here today. DSS here in Houston and in Nigeria is pleased to see this forced labor survivor will receive full restitution today. This is not only empowering, but life-changing, and we are immensely happy for her. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mary Magnus with Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Magnus. I'm an Assistant Special Agent in charge with Department of Homeland Security Investigations. I would like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Just like my fellow counterparts here have stated, this investigation is extremely significant. We partner directly with Department of State, Diplomatic Service, and we're very happy for the outcome of this investigation. In particular, there is one individual that I would like to thank, and I don't want to steal HPD's thunder on this, but had it not been for the language services of HPD Officer Chudi Onwuka, who speaks Igbo, we would not have been able to be successful in communicating with the victim. We were lacking cultural competence in understanding her, and we had to break down a lot of barriers. So we are very, very grateful to HPD for allowing him to come and translate for us. Trafficking is a very important component in terms of our programs in Homeland Security investigations, and this investigation could not have been successful without the assistance of all of our partners that you see standing here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Chief Jones?
Good afternoon. My name's James Jones. I'm an assistant chief with the Houston Police Department. I'm assigned to the Special Investigations Command, which includes the Vice Division, Narcotics Division, Major Offenders, Criminal Investigations Division, and Vehicular Crimes Division. What I'd like to kind of start with is by saying that, Houston Police Department has recognized this heinous crime that we call human trafficking for what it is for many years. We formed a special unit in 2014, which is designated just to investigate these types of crimes. Most people think of human trafficking as only sexual exploitation, which is a large percentage of what we do, but labor trafficking is part of it. And as was described today, labor trafficking is a very complicated and difficult crime to investigate because it's not in Houston. It's not just in the county. They've spoke about this case went overseas. There are things that it's international. So we need a partnership, which we created in 2016 when we created the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance through a grant from the federal government. This incorporated numerous agencies, state, federal, and local, DA's office, to help us investigate human trafficking, both sexual exploitation and trafficking of victims. We could not investigate these crimes without all the different assets. As you saw today, heard today just with Ms. Magnus, we assisted with our language skills and other assets from the Houston Police Department in this investigation, even though it took place in the county. The Houston Police Department is very lucky. We have people from all different nationalities and languages throughout the world that in our department. So we are very fortunate to have those assets available. And without the assets of the federal government, none of this stuff would take place either, because we received the grant, and which brought all the parties together. So we are very fortunate to have the resources in Houston to deal with this type of crime. And I will take something that I heard from Ruben Perez just a few minutes ago and steal it from him. I hear very often that we are considered the hub of human trafficking. I disagree with that. Houston's not the hub, but we aggressively go after human trafficking. So I think people see it here more often than they may see it other places because we recognize what it is. And so I think we're doing a good job of addressing it and trying to track it down and stop it. It's obviously pervasive, and it's very difficult for us to completely stop it, but we're going to do our best. I kind of lost my train of thought on that. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, one of the other things is the community. This investigation brought together all the things that we need. We need the help, input from the community, people in businesses, the neighbors. If you see something, say something. Chief Acevedo just today did a press conference on domestic violence, family violence. And one of the things he promised to do is we're going to put a training video up on our website to give the public training on what to look for human trafficking, what to look for sexual exploitation, because we need the tips from the public, and even our officers need the training. So we do provide the training to our officers, and we'll try to put something on the website for the public so we can get some more tips. I think that's the way we can combat this even further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. So we'll take some questions here in a moment if anybody has any, but I want to stress again that when people, like I said, they see something, if their gut tells them something is out of place, if there's a home that just doesn't look right, if there's people coming and going that they know don't fit in, if there's something that raises that suspicion, whether it's Crime Stoppers, whether it's one of these national tip lines, whether it's just your local police department, make that phone call, and these wonderful men and women and the agencies that support them can investigate those leads. And there is no way that this kind of case can be handled by any one individual agency. It does take all these, everybody with their particular background, their particular specialty, whether it was the Department of Labor stepping up during sentencing to be able to come up with salary formulas, whether it was the Department of State having assets in Nigeria. Like, no one of us could have done this. And that's why this model is so specific. So with that, if anybody has any questions, we will entertain them. Yes, Gabby?
What's the phone number that we're supposed to call?
What's it?
888
Do you know?
37 37 888. 888 37 37 888.
37, 37.
888. 888 37 37 888. It's 4 then 3.
We did that on purpose.
A little backwards. Yes.
What's next for this person? You know, a victim has been given restitution. What's next for them? What's the next turn in life?
Well, that can be pretty. Yeah, you want to address that? Can be kind of broad. Ruben, have at it. Ruben's not shy.
I'm Ruben Perez. I'm an assistant district attorney. I was a DA from 81 to 92. Then from 92 to last year, I was an assistant U.S. attorney. Now I'm back at the DA's office working for Kim Ogg. The path to this lady who was a victim can be citizenship. When they come here and they cooperate with law enforcement, they get what's called continued presence. That's generally good for about a year. And after that, they can get a T visa, a trafficking visa, and that's good for about 3 years. And after that, it can lead to citizenship.
Was this lady able to provide other intel for you all in working potentially other cases in the same realm?
I'd rather not comment on that, okay?
Here, Ruben, let me cut you off real quick. I forgot to introduce the YMCA, one of our major partners here. So, major partner, Jeff Watkins. So, I'm going to hear about this for a while. But this is Jeff Watkins from the YMCA, and he has.
That's okay. Public speaking is everyone's fear, and so I was okay with it. But thank you so much, Jeff Watkins. I'm Vice President for Global Initiatives with the YMCA Greater Houston. I oversee YMCA International Services, which houses our Traffic Persons Assistance Program. First of all, I'd like to tell you all how proud we are as the YMCA to be one of the founding members of the task force that was created back in 2004. And as the nonprofit, victim-centered, trauma-informed service provider, we take our role very seriously, and when we have successes like this, it's something that we truly celebrate. First of all, I would like to thank our law enforcement partners. The investigation, the apprehension, the prosecution, and the process of gaining restitution for our victim is so important. And we just want to lift up their hard work. At the same time, I want to recognize the hard work of our TPAP and other staff at YMCA International Service, that while law enforcement was doing their very important role, they were working extensively with this victim in terms of meeting all of her needs. Our approach is holistic. It included counseling for this victim. It included medical case management because she had some injuries that needed to be addressed. As she recovers, we're going to be working with her on employment and self-sufficiency. And the process will continue. The question was asked about her being able to adjust her status and ultimately become a citizen. We will be able to assist her with that as well. I'd also like to recognize one of our other nonprofit members of the task force, and that's United Against Human Trafficking, which does the outreach, the education, the advocacy that's so important, and in this case led to the wonderful result that we got. And so I would just lift this up as an example of the hard work of the task force. When we work together, this is what can happen. At International Service, we actually have a tagline, and I think this truly applies to our role in this, but I think it applies to the task force as a whole, and that is restoring hope, building stability, creating opportunities, and changing futures. Thank you.
Also want to say that in the press packets that you have on the digital media, you have copies of the indictments, of the plea papers, but also of the original criminal complaint that lays out most of the historical facts and details of the investigation in much more detail than we went in here today. So that's also there. Yes?
What can you tell us about her condition now? I know there are some things you can't say, but I remember from sitting in court, she had broken bones that were not tended to. I mean, a long list of issues simply from the abuse she endured in that home. How is she today?
You want to go for that? That's your wheelhouse.
She's doing very well. We're getting to the point where we're contemplating conversations around employment. So we've been able to arrange for medical treatment, and she's doing very well.
And actually, she had a broken arm that was improperly set.
Improperly set, yes.
In Nigeria, and a doctor here in Houston volunteered his time and donated his time to reset her arm and fix her arm.
Right. And that was all arranged through our
Through them.
through the medical case management program, which is separate from Traffic Persons Assistance Program.
Yes, Ken?
I'm just asking if you can talk a little bit more about problems that she expressed to you that you think may be prevalent or unique to her besides the arm. Anything, you know.
Well, her experience was a traumatic one, and so she spent a lot of time. We have an in-house counselor that has worked extensively with the victim. We utilize a case management model, so as we identify barriers, we come up with strategies and how we address those barriers. I can't go into detail. It's a long road back, but we're glad to say she's well on that, on her way on that road.
And so there's therapy and there's medical care, and what are the other components broadly that you offer to trafficking victims?
Right. When victims are first identified, we start with emergency medical, emergency counseling, really stabilizing the victims once they're identified, and then we really just take it from there, depending on the individual needs of that particular victim.
But employment is one of them?
Ultimately, if they are able to be employed, that really self-sufficiency, and $121,000 sounds like a lot of money, but that's not going to sustain her for a very long period unless there's a strategy for her to be self-sufficient, and in this case, it means employment.
So just to be clear, she is in the process of legalizing her status?
Correct. Foreign-born victims of human trafficking are eligible for what's called a T visa. And this is where it links into other services that are provided by international services, because once they're certified as a victim of human trafficking, they get continuing presence, which is basically law enforcement certification. Then they become eligible for all services that refugees, and YMCA International Services is one of the primary refugee resettlement agencies here in the city. So that's how we can serve her with case management and medical case management, and that's how we're able to provide these wraparound services.
And how was she recruited? Is there any concern that this is part of a larger organized crime in Nigeria that's sending people over to the U.S.?
I don't think that's a question for me.
Yeah. You want to handle that?
She was not recruited as part of an organized crime. The family hired her as a nanny, their own nanny in Nigeria. So they brought her with them with the intent to be a nanny here in the United States, albeit, as Mr. Patrick has said, basically as a modern form of slavery. So this is there are a lot of instances like this around the world, and that's why diplomatic security is so involved in human trafficking efforts, not just from Nigeria, but from all over the world. But this was a one-off case, so it was not part of a organized crime.
How old is the victim? Adrian?
Kate, you remember how old she is? Oh. Can't say.
Yes.
You spoke earlier, the gentleman who was just joining spoke earlier about where this person came from in Nigeria, very humble surroundings, the lack of adversity. I don't know who was up there that actually presented the news that she received this money. Can someone speak to the moment someone told her you are going to be receiving this significant amount of money, and what her reaction was like at that moment when it grasped in her knowledge what was happening?
Julie, would that have been at sentencing, or would that have been later?
It would have been later.
Would have been later? Who could anybody? Was anybody in the back speak? And was anybody witness that moment? I don't know.
Constance witnessed it, but she's not.
That's right. Okay.
So the YMCA.
She's our program director for TPAT.
Yeah.
Can you give us a timeline on that moment, when that moment happened?
It was very recently.
This week?
I don't know. Has it been in the last couple of weeks or so? It's been very recent. I do know that.
The last couple of days.
Yes. I mean, the check was cut within the last few days.
Yes.
I don't know if it's physically in her possession yet, but the money is there.
Moving forward, how do you think this is going to change precedent within other districts around the nation?
Well, I mean, my understanding of this program, it's been a model that's been taken around the country. But these groups are only as good as the information and intelligence that comes into us. So that's why we're really asking for people's help. I mean, it's, like I said before, there are plenty of these situations. In a city as big, in an area as big as Houston, and throughout our Southern District, like I said, from here to Laredo, it's almost 8.5 million people. There are going to be situations where people have seen something that just doesn't seem right. And if it raises that, I mean, this started, like I said, with neighbors making a call to this tip line, getting feedback from the person on the other end. Well, why don't you ask these questions? Try to build this relationship. Go forward with this. I mean, this took many months to get to that point. But this was a whole street of neighbors coming together to get this woman out of that house. I mean, it was, like I said, it was something, if you saw it in a movie, you wouldn't believe it. Yeah.
Can you, or anyone here, talk about what those neighbors saw? Like, what are the clues that people should look for?
I don't know if anybody knew the specifics on this. Ruben? I mean, Ruben was part of this case from the beginning, and so was Julie. And
Yeah.
Julie, you want to come up here? You want to? Come on. This is Julie Searle. She's the one who finally got this thing to final resolution, so she can speak to some of this.
Hello. How are y'all doing?
When Julie and I first got this case, one of the signs was, correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, it's been a while, same pattern. She would walk by herself, never go anywhere, always with the same kids, never go anywhere. It's a constant pattern. I mean, same clothing, didn't talk to anybody else, just talked to the kids that she was walking, the couple's kids. Isolation, just isolation, I think, is the best word to describe it.
And a lot of these details are laid out in the criminal complaint that is part of the digital copy of your handout. It's multiple pages.
Yeah, I think that's correct. She was pretty isolated, and neighbors would tell us that they noticed certain things, like she was wearing shoes that didn't fit her feet, or the same clothing all the time. It was just the little details that neighbors noticed by being very cognizant and aware. And it did take a couple of months, while the neighbors were trying to figure out what was going on. But it was through, I think, a true, genuine friendship that eventually formed between one particular neighbor and our victim. And her constant consultation from the National Trafficking Hotline, looking out for tips and signs, that ultimately the group of neighbors got together and helped formulate a rescue plan. The really beautiful thing about this is that our victim genuinely cared about the children she was taking care of, and so the timing of the rescue was important because she genuinely cared about the kids. But this is just a beautiful illustration of good people doing the right thing and just being aware and noticing what's going on your own street.
And I want to emphasize what U.S. Attorney Patrick said. It doesn't cost anything to make that phone call. 888-3737-88. It doesn't cost anything. Call it. If you're wrong, you're wrong. But if you're right, you may save a life.
What's the process with the witnesses? In this case, they were neighbors, but we have a lot of cases where the victim is around many immigrants or undocumented people that they're afraid to report. What's the process with them so they won't be afraid to say something like this?
Well, this is a good forum for us to tell victims out there, potential victims, and the community in general, we're not here to deport victims of crime. We're here to protect victims of crime. If you're on our soil in the United States of America, our Constitution protects everybody on our soil. It doesn't say citizens. Our Constitution says persons. So please, the media, you have a great role to play for us. Spread the word that we're not here to hurt anybody. We're here to help them, as evidenced in this case.
With the witnesses, it's fine.
I'm sorry?
With the witnesses, that's what I mean.
Witnesses. We're not here to hurt people. We're here to help people.
Was there a language barrier between the neighbors and the woman? Were they able to speak?
Initially, yes. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Initially, yes, because English was not our victim's first language. And so this is something that she was learning, and the longer she was here, the better her English.
But the neighbors were not able to speak her language.
No. So any communication that occurred between the victim and the neighbors occurred in English.
Not too many people speak Igbo.
I'd like to add one thing in terms of the question about sort of fear coming forward. For victims themselves, while we do get many referrals from law enforcement, we have had victims that will come directly to the YMCA. We can screen them, and if there's evidence that they are a victim, and then we will connect them with law enforcement. So if there are victims out there, or they think they're victims, they can come to the YMCA to be screened by our staff if that is a legitimate fear that they have.
All right. Anyone else? Thank you all very much. Thank you.